Hello and welcome to Season 2 of Futbol 360. Thanks to everyone who helped and supported the first season. It was a really enjoyable experience for me. I'm looking forward to bringing you some more new football content this year. 2020 has been a tough year for everyone. Of course, there's things much more important in this world than football, but for anyone who's been involved in football at any level, as a coach, a player, an administrator, a fan, unfortunately we've all been waiting around, a lot of uncertainty, kind of kicking our heels a little bit, but it does look like the football world is getting back into gear, and albeit in a slightly different way, and preparing for it slightly differently with certain restrictions in place. It looks like we'll all be getting back involved with the game in one form or another in the coming weeks. So I wish everyone a really successful and enjoyable new season. As regards Season 2 of Futbol 360, my first guest is Clive, who's the Lincoln City chairman. Clive is a South African guy who still spends most of his year out there. He fell in love with the game in the 1960s and fell in love with English football particularly back then. He's been an Everton fan since then, and he's hugely passionate about the game. He devoured every bit of information he could find about the game as a young guy out in South Africa, and that obsession has continued throughout his life. He got involved with Lincoln City in 2016, initially as an investor. He's had a terrific career in finance, opening the first hedge fund in South Africa, and subsequently going on to become the chairman of the company Peregrine Capital out there. But his investment in Lincoln City led to a journey which I think many people are aware of now. He helped them restructure finance, was involved in the appointment of the Cowley brothers, and the rest, as they say, is history. He's had a wonderful journey there. He was appointed chairman in 2018, and his time there has coincided with an incredible upturn in their fortunes, and the club that he now is chairman of is not recognisable from the club he entered in 2016. He's a great guy, very understated, lovely fella, but with fantastic business acumen, and he's helped to apply that and combine that with his passion for football. I think you're really going to enjoy this one.
And welcome to Futbol 360. This is the first interview of a new season, a very different season for everyone, I think, and I'm delighted to welcome Clive Nates, the chairman of Lincoln City Football Club, onto the show. So, Clive, thank you very much for joining us.
Okay, my pleasure, Kevin.
Great, good stuff. Okay, so we're going to go straight into a warm-up, as I like to call it, just to get the conversation flowing before we get into the main part of the interview. So, to start off with, Clive, who's your favourite player ever and why?
Alan Ball, and he's the reason I supported Everton, the hero from the 1966 England World Cup winning team, youngest member of the team, and I just loved the way he played. He was talented, but he also never gave up. 100 miles an hour with them, and he was my favourite player as a kid. And,
great.
I've suffered being an Everton fan as a result for most of the 50 years since.
Well, it's a good one. That 66 World Cup side is iconic, and hopefully we'll have some new heroes to cheer about at some stage in the not too distant future. But I did watch an Alan Ball. He was speaking at an after dinner speaking event. And it's on YouTube, and I have to say he was a really captivating speaker, someone who really held the audience. He's a really funny guy as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, okay, on to number two. So, your favourite team ever. So, this isn't necessarily Everton, or it could be an Everton side, but your favourite team from a specific moment in time, and why you enjoyed watching that team.
I think it probably is the 1984-1985 Everton team that won the league title, and in particular won the Cup Winners' Cup, and the win over Bayern Munich in the semi-finals, which is just legendary amongst any Everton fan of that time.
Brilliant. Yeah, some team, that Bayern Munich team as well.
Yeah, and probably they might have been the two best teams in Europe playing in the Cup Winners' Cup that season.
Sure. I actually think we grew up in Guernsey, but my father was across in the UK at the time, and I think he watched. I don't know if it was a Bayern Munich game, but he went to watch one of the the home ties in that cup run to the Cup Winners' Cup final. So yeah, I remember him bringing home the programme I had when I was 7 or 8 years old. So it has some significance for me, that one as well. Okay, next question. If you have, let's say we've got a cup final with 22 of the best players in the world, 11 on one side and 11 on the other, and you're the chairman, you're the chairman of one of the teams, which manager would you pick to get a result in that one game? So I'm not necessarily talking about a manager to build a club or to build a team over a period of time, just to tactically get you a result on that day. Who would you go for?
Probably in his prime, Jose Mourinho. Anybody could get a result in a particular game would be him.
Yeah.
Not sure I would have appreciated the style of play or how he achieved that, but if you wanted a result, I think he would have been your man. Great
answer. You're not the first person who's given that answer to that question. So I think there's some fairly smart cookies out there who would say the same as you. Great. Okay. And then final question before we get into the main part of the interview. Clive, could you tell us a little known fact about Clive Nates that very few people would know, or something about you that only perhaps your family and close friends would know about you? Just so it could be completely unrelated to football.
Well, other than family, well, maybe the fact that I like to play Football Manager.
Okay.
So I got involved with Lincoln City, and Lincoln City was the team I normally played with.
Wow. And how far did you get with them?
Not very far. I used to get irritated with the game, didn't have enough patience, a lot of bugs in the game, and would tend to give up before I actually achieved anything. But anyway, it's a bit of fun at times.
Terrific. Great answer. Okay. So Clive, let's get into the main part of the interview. I think what I wanted to touch on today, certainly to start off with, is a topic that's relevant for all of us, and that's the impact of COVID on the game. I mean, can you give me an update on your views on the impact, and what do you think the long-term impact is going to be on the game in the UK particularly?
Well, look, I mean, it's obviously had a significant impact in a whole lot of different ways. Bringing the season to an end, or at least in the case of the Premier League and the Championship, there was a significant break. At least those teams came back, finished the season, but there was an impact, I think, in particular on some teams in the Championship who didn't have players that were there to finish off the season.
Sure.
Charlton and Hull City in particular, the two clubs that were significantly impacted, and look, they might have got relegated in any event, but when you lose some key players, that's going to disrupt your season.
Yeah,
there's obviously further disruption lower down, in particular in League One, where some teams felt that the points per game solution was unfair on them. And I think to some extent you can say that Tranmere got the short straw there, even though I think their solution wasn't the right one. It was a very flawed methodology that they put forward to have.
What was that? Just briefly, what was their proposal?
Well, they came up with a margin of error, and the way they calculated was just completely flawed. They took a whole lot of averages over the 3 previous seasons across the 3 EFL leagues, and then calculated a margin of error. But that methodology, as I said, is just flawed. You can't take an average. You can't take an average of a margin of error of a team towards the bottom of the league and apply that to a team at the top of the league.
No.
And vice versa. So, whatever they came up with just didn't make sense. But to be fair to Tranmere, there's no doubt there was a significant margin of error for them. They could have got out of it. But to be absolutely honest, I can't see any other solution to the one that was chosen by the majority of teams. Beyond points per game, I don't know what else you could have chosen that would have been better. Voiding the season for me, was just totally out. To have playoffs against teams coming up from League Two didn't make sense. So, just an unfortunate situation for them.
No, I'd agree. I mean, to be honest, we're moving on from it now, and hopefully we won't be faced with the same situation again in the near future. But it's not beyond the realms of possibility that it's going to get disrupted again.
Absolutely. The EFL, I think, is looking at the moment in trying to come up with regulations that would cater for that if this happened again.
Sure.
Which I think, is absolutely the right thing to do. Decide up front what would happen in the event of a similar situation occurring again, and at what point that would actually kick in. If you've only played 20 games, then maybe you would actually have to void the season if it couldn't be completed. But if you've got as far as a certain stage, whatever it is, 30 games maybe, then, I think points per game is the only fair solution.
Yeah, okay. And that's, I think for me, it's like anything in life and business and football, whatever. If you communicate it up front and everyone understands, the boundaries and the rules and the way that those rules will be applied in the first place, then you can't really have all that discussion or what have you afterwards, because you've all signed up to it in the first instance. So it sounds like a sensible approach.
Yeah, obviously what happened was a unique situation that nobody, could have thought of. And, getting back to your original question, the other impact was obviously from a financial point of view, which has had some impact, but I think the full impact of COVID is probably still to come for the majority of clubs.
Yeah.
A lot of clubs have been helped by government schemes, COVID job retention scheme, deferment of PAYE and VAT, deferment of player salaries. So all that I think has helped. Also advance payments from the Premier League, from the EFL. But there is going to be a point where clubs, once all the players, staff are back from furlough, once you start paying HMRC back, there is going to be a point at which clubs are going to be, I think, facing some serious issues unless the EFL does deliver on the rescue package that it's negotiating with the Premier League. That I think is vital for many clubs.
Yeah, it's God, we could talk about this one subject all day, Clive. It's been a bugbear of mine that certainly in the non-league game, the top end of the non-league game, a number of clubs have gone to the wall and gone into administration and liquidation and reinvented themselves and gone back through and then made the same mistakes again. Only a few years later, generally chasing promotions and trophies and putting the money into the playing squad. And I think for me, as a fan, as a coach, as someone who loves the game and is involved in it to some degree, you would hope that the right balance is struck between the support packages, but also the need for good practice and good governance within the clubs themselves.
Well, that might be one of the positive impacts of COVID. I think firstly, salary caps would not have been introduced at League One and League Two level without the impact of COVID. A lot of clubs, or not a lot of clubs, but certainly a few clubs are not too happy about that. And I can understand to some extent, why the bigger clubs are not happy about it. I believe in the concept. I think it can really help. I don't think we have the perfect regulations at this stage. In fact, I think there are a lot of issues with some of the regulations. It was a bit of a rush job, but you hope in time, the regulations will be amended. So it will serve the purpose for which they have been introduced.
Yeah, you'd hope so. You'd hope so. Okay, it's quite a good link into the next question, really, because in my opinion, salary caps are going to really shine a light on the coaching and management and the effect, or how effective coaches and managers are. Because I think a lot of coaches in smaller clubs have always had this kind of chip on their shoulder about competing with the big guys with big budgets, and whilst there's still going to be a delta between some of them, it's going to level the playing field a little bit, and I'm looking forward to seeing how coaches and managers adapt and which ones come through and develop and gain success in this relatively new world we're living. But from your point of view, can you tell me, as a chairman, you've had obviously great, some great experiences so far in the game, but can you tell me a little bit about your views on the manager's role in a football club, and particularly how you think it might change as a result of the situation we find ourselves in at the moment?
I don't think there's, one defined role, for a manager. I think it depends on the club. Depends on the club at a particular point in time. And if you look at us, when we appointed Danny and Nicky, I think we were a club, as Danny said, we're a club in mourning. It was a club also that had been in non-league for 5 years, that had made significant cuts to staff, to costs. And, in fairness, you can't say it was a well-run club at that point. And I think you needed to get in a management team that almost took control of the situation. There was a lot that they did beyond which you would expect a normal manager to do. There was a lot of, obviously, fan interaction, and a lot of fans that drifted away from the club, and it needed somebody to bring them back, even before we attained the success that we did. And obviously, a lot more fans started to come back on the back of that. But even without that, it needed right up front a new way to engage with the fans. And I think there were a lot more things that Danny and Nicky did for the long-term future of the club. They started to implement changes in the academy, and being a non-league club, the funding of the academy fell away. So it was only thanks to amazing work done by a whole lot of people connected with the club in raising money that actually kept the academy going through those very difficult non-league years. And certainly once we got back to the Football League, the funding started again. There were plans put in place to revitalise that academy. One of the things that happened around that time is Danny and Nicky recommended Jez George, who had been at Cambridge United, to join Lincoln City. He came in as a head of football. I wouldn't say it would have been in the true way that a head of football comes into a club. Normally, that is a position that the club decides on and appoints a person almost, to be above the manager. And here it came in a different way where, Danny saw he needed somebody else with his focus mainly on, the first team, to actually start making some other changes on the football side, and needed a person like Jez to actually start implementing that, in particular with regard to the academy. And that's where I've spoken about, it's not the same. The manager is, the different roles for a manager or head coach. And if you come to where Lincoln City is now, Jez George is now a fully fledged director of football. And that will be a position that we see going forward, no matter who the manager of Lincoln City is.
Yeah.
It's a structure that we now believe in. It provides continuity from one manager to the next. And so the role of Michael Appleton is different from the role that Danny and Nicky had, especially
Absolutely.
when they came into the club. So,
Absolutely.
so I would say with Michael, having a director of football there, he can spend a lot more time focusing on being on the grass, bringing the players along. He still has a massive part of the recruitment, and no player would be signed without Michael wanting that player. But
Sure.
there is a structure in place now where Jez, would be involved in negotiating the deals, dealing with the agent, dealing with the other club. Whereas we didn't have that when Danny and Nicky came in, and that was very much Danny's responsibility to be doing all of that, negotiating with the player, negotiating with the agent.
Yeah. I mean, I think, it's a great answer. Basically, one size does not fit all in this scenario, and it depends on the situation and the context. Again, as you would get with any organisation, but I had not reservations, but if there was one thing that I left spending some time at Lincoln City with, it was that the management team at the time had control and influence over everything. I mean, absolutely everything. You could see the influence that they had on all of the staff, all of the people walking around the stadium, the ticket office, what was the name, Sarah Jane in the kitchen. I mean, and the connection that they had was unbelievable, and it was so rare to see that in a managing team or a manager of a football club. And I think my reservation was that they would have to delegate, and it wasn't in their ability to delegate in the future, because they've adapted from the 9th tier of English football all the way up to the second tier so far. Been successful at every level, but it was that at some stage in the future they were going to have to bring more people in, and also the people above them were going to have to put structures in place to ensure that they weren't distracted quite as much as they were. I mean, it's not sustainable to work 90 hours a week, although perhaps they would disagree with me.
Yeah, I think it was also easier as a non-league club. There weren't the same amount of requirements for a non-league club. It was a lot smaller. Once you get into the Football League, there's just so much more requirements from the EFL. And also once you start going from an average of 2,500 fans to 9,000 fans, it's just the whole infrastructure just takes a massive leap.
Sure.
And no one person, has that ability to have the same control as you have over a much smaller club.
Absolutely. It's a great sort of journey to reflect on. Obviously, I think very unique. But what I wanted to kind of touch on and expand upon a little bit was the difference between a non-league club and a football league club. I mean, how do you compare the club that you came into to the club that you're now the chairman of?
Yeah, as a non-league club, it's just a lot smaller. Like I said, you don't have the same requirements from the Football League or the National League authorities, whereas there's just much more in the way of requirements, from the Football League. And even if you look at the academy, when you're running the academy as a non-league club, you run it as you want. You suddenly come up to the Football League and you're now subject to audit in order to get the funding. It just moves up to a completely different level. They're not comparable at all. In the non-league, we had a managing director who was also the financial director come up to the Football League, and the submissions that you need to put into the EFL, the funds that you're now responsible for, you just had to separate those responsibilities. You now needed a separate financial person to come in. It's just moving from what is essentially a small business to a much bigger business.
Yeah. Okay. And as a football fan, so because I love your profile, Clive. I love the fact that you were a passionate supporter of the game before you got involved in administration of a football club and the running of a football club. I feel very strongly about the camaraderie that exists lower down the football pyramid, and perhaps you get some of the feelings that you used to get higher up in the pyramid many years ago. So the traditionalists love that connection, the connection between the players and the fans, the connection between the directors of the various clubs and their players and the fans, and it kind of feels like a bit of a family down there. I mean, how did that feel to you coming into football and to be welcomed into that kind of, that I guess that kind of environment before things started to get a little bit more serious as you progressed?
I mean, my whole reason for getting involved with Lincoln City, was not to think I was actually going to be involved in the management or anything. It was just to find a way to enjoy football to a far greater extent than I could just as a fan. So I wanted to experience things. I mean, I kicked the ball around, but it wasn't very good. And then I went through my career, and there was always at the back of my mind, how could I have some involvement in something that, had taken up so many hours of my life, that ruined weekends or whatever when my team lost. And I just wanted to be able to have contact with a real manager, to maybe go scouting with the manager, just to experience that. And that was my only intention when I first got involved.
I love that.
So it was only once I got involved that I could see, well, from my business experience, there was maybe some value that I could add, and one thing just led to another. But I mean, all of it really was the football experience, enjoying it. And I think the fans are part of it. I mean, if you're on your own, even though I spoke about Football Manager. Okay, you do well on Football Manager, let's say, but there's nobody to share that experience with as such. When you're doing it, in real time, and you're getting involved, whether it's, with the friends that have come in and invested with me in Lincoln City, the directors on the board that I've become friendly with, or just fans that I've interacted with, and some that I've, become more friendly with. This is all just added to the amazing experience that I've had. It's all just part
I love that. I think it's that's amazing. It's a very, very pure experience, because we whilst I've become slightly less emotional about the game as I've played and coached, and so I've looked at the game through a different lens. There are still moments that take me back to when I was a little kid. I mean, talking about you as an Everton fan, I remember listening to my radio underneath my bed covers when I should have been asleep. Middlesbrough played. I'm a Middlesbrough fan, and Middlesbrough played Everton. I think it was the second replay in the FA Cup, maybe fifth or sixth round, and if we'd have won, we'd have gone through and played Liverpool, I think. And that those experiences as a kid and the magic that you, and it's a lot of it is about your imagination. I've lost a lot of that, I guess, over the years, and every now and then it kind of comes back, or little memories like that come back, and I remember how special the game is. And I think for a chairman of a League One club to have, I'm sure you're not the only one. There's some great chairmen out there who speak you know, with they can still connect with fans on that level. Although sadly, I think probably the trend is gradually towards perhaps people who in influence at football clubs, certainly higher up, that don't at least communicate that to people. And I think that's a shame, because it's part of the game that I think makes it so special. So Clive, one thing that I wanted to touch on was the difference between running a business and running a football club. You've got a very unique profile. I believe you started the first hedge fund and ran the first hedge fund in South Africa, and had a long career in the finance industry. But what I'm interested to understand is, do you operate under different under a different framework now you're working in football? Do you carry over? Are there a lot of similarities, or do you see some similarities between the two industries? And how has your kind of management and leadership approach changed since you've been involved in football?
I think there are a lot of similarities between any business. You'll have, certain financial controls, disciplines, or you should have in any business, and I would have had those in the hedge fund management business, that you can apply in a football club, so that it runs in an optimal manner.
Sure.
That cash resources managed correctly, costs are controlled. You can bring all those disciplines into a football club, and I think a lot of those have improved from where we were in non-league to where we are today. But there's no doubt that a normal conventional business is very different from a football club. In a normal
Sure.
business, you're trying to generate a profit or a return on capital, whereas a football club, just about everything ultimately is measured on the success on the field. And that would be different for different clubs. Liverpool, their success on the field would be very different from, let's say in particular, what Lincoln City wanted last season, for instance, which, was a season of consolidation, and how we measured that, would ultimately decide on, how that season went. But, I mean, behind the scenes, there are a lot of things that you're doing, or that you even have to do to see that the business is sustainable. But a lot of the things that you're putting in place are ultimately to ensure that you get that success on the field. Like I've mentioned about the academy and the improvements there, and bringing in younger players. Well, that's also all great from a fan engagement point of view, and having a local presence there and being in the community. But ultimately, you want to bring through players that can help the team, that can maybe generate profits that will help the team. What we're doing at the moment, trying to bring the average age of the team down, playing more attractive football, all that ultimately is with the intention of getting success on the field. And I think the other big difference between a normal business and a football club is a normal business will have customers and shareholders, whereas a football club has fans, which are both your customer and are probably the real owners of that club. Customers will be with a business and then they'll move on. Same with shareholders. But your fans are there basically for their whole lives. They will outlive any director on the board, any player, any manager. So, it's very different from that point of view and how you interact with them. They're far more demanding than I would imagine any customer or shareholder would be, because they're passionate about it. It's probably, for many of us as fans, other than our families, there's probably not a lot more important for us than how a football club is doing. And I think that what makes probably any sporting team, but it makes a football club very, very different from a normal business.
Yes, yeah, no, I'm with you. And I mean, could you imagine yourself sitting on the board at a Premier League club, let's say a mid-table Premier League club, in that situation? I mean, how do you think the fan dynamic changes there? Because to me, you know, it feels like the fans are, you know, it's kind of a PR above the line kind of strategy, but ultimately it's not necessarily part of the critical success criteria for clubs at that level. I mean, how would you deal with, or you know, how would you envisage it would be if you had that type of role?
I think as best as possible, it's got to be the same, you know, at any level. I know the fans will be a far bigger contributor to Lincoln City at our level than maybe the fans would be to, as you say, the table, you know, Premier League team, because there's just so much income coming in from other directions. You know, there's far more overseas fans. But, you know, I think there are clubs, you know, that have a similar sort of interaction. You know, I think very much from, you know, the club that I've supported for, you know, more than 50 years. You know, I think they're massive in the community in Liverpool. I think they've got, you know, a wonderful interaction with their fans, or even though a lot of fans would be hoping there would be more success on the field. I don't think it should change. I really don't believe it should change.
Sure. No, it's good. It's nice to hear that. I mean, I know, you know, I'd look to maybe Germany as an example where you can produce some of the best teams in the world and still have a fan culture and some kind of social equity that's of a high, you know, of a really high level and a high importance at the boardroom level. Yeah, there are examples out there where it's possible to look like that.
Yeah, and I think part of that has been lost. You know, and maybe it's strange for me to say, but, you know, with maybe foreign owners coming in without maybe the history of following English football more for a business proposition rather than a love of the game. And who knows, maybe despite the criticism from some of salary caps, maybe that just might help us get back to more sustainable football clubs that will allow more fans to maybe have a bigger interest in their clubs, because maybe you won't need all this money to come in from rich businessmen or whatever, and maybe, you know, the more sustainable clubs can be, the more they can be owned by their fan bases, the more those fan bases can have input into those clubs. And I know it's maybe still just a dream.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I think that would be better for football.
And perhaps on this conversation we've come a little bit full circle as well, because we started with COVID, and, you know, getting towards the end, we might be talking about a scenario that could be a consequence of COVID, if you see what I mean. That the game might have to be to cut its cloth accordingly, and that the importance that the fans have might actually gain a little bit more influence again, rather than perhaps, you know, move away as we've seen in the last few years. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, a consequence of COVID, and probably even before that, after we saw with Bury and Bolton, you hope, you know, there will be an improvement in the directors and owners test. I think you just have to accept, no matter how stringent you make any rules, we humans, and there's always the possibility something will go wrong. But I think you've got to limit the risk of that happening. And without a doubt, it needs far more stricter directors and owners test.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think that's painstakingly obvious to anyone with any interest in the game, that the game itself and the fans have been let down by the authorities in terms of some of the lack of due diligence, and some of the people who've been allowed to come in and influence clubs and communities, and the relationships that they've had established over 100 years, for someone to come in and open a checkbook, or even a virtual checkbook, as it seems to be the case at Wigan, and then disappear off and leave a huge mess for the community and the people left at the club to clear up. It's really disappointing, but on the flip side, it's fantastic that there are also people like yourself who've come into the game with the kind of with an interest in preserving elements of the game that I think are important and that make the English game what it is, but also bring some skills and some qualities that would pass the more stringent due diligence tests you might find in the business world.
Yeah, and I think that's what's so special about the English football pyramid. I mean, I might have supported Everton, from the late 1960s, but I had an interest in all the leagues. When the Sunday newspaper came, there it would have all the results from the previous day and the tables, and I would look at every result and
Brilliant.
Look at the table. It was fascinating just as a football fan, even if you didn't support the teams. Just seeing the teams going through their battles of promotion or relegation, and it really is for even somebody at the end of the world in South Africa to be following that. It was special. The cups, which again also seem to be taking a back seat now.
Yeah.
There was something really special about English football, and it's why I think it's got so many fans all across the world.
Sure. Okay. Look, Clive, I mean, it's a breath of fresh air to hear a chairman, of a League One club, of a football league club, talk in those terms. There's a lot of us out there who are obsessed with the game to levels that probably most normal people wouldn't understand. But I think you clearly do, and I'd congratulate you on what you've achieved so far. I know everything that's been done at Lincoln City Football Club has been done as a result of a team effort. Of course, you had a management team that were very successful, and another very talented manager in Michael Appleton now. But I've seen it firsthand, the cohesive kind of effort of everyone at Lincoln. What I really want to just finish the call off by saying is thanks for coming on. Please keep doing what you're doing, because if the Football League and football in general in the UK is influenced by people who have the kind of business acumen and the people acumen that you clearly have, then the game will be in a better position in the future than perhaps some of the situations we've found recently. And it's been a pleasure talking to you about the game. The quality of the calls kind of wobbled a little bit at times. As I say, we might have a problem between Spain and South Africa at the moment. We might have to pick up the phone to the respective telcos. But the sentiment has been loud and clear. And yeah, I just want to say thank you very much for coming on the call, Clive. I really enjoyed it.
No, a pleasure. It's great meeting you, great talking to you. And yeah, I'm sure we'll keep in touch.
Yes, we will. Well, good luck and best wishes for the new season. Keep up the good work and stay safe.
Okay. Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks, Clive. All the best.
Yeah. Bye.